Welcome back to Silent Shadows. Tonight, we descend into one of the darkest chapters of Southern California's history, a period in 1979 when terror stalked the freeways and beaches, embodied by two men, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris. Their names would become synonymous with unimaginable cruelty, earning them a chilling moniker, the Toolbox Killers. Over a terrifying 5-month span, from June to October 1979, these men committed the kidnapping, rape, torture, and murder of 5 teenage girls. Their hunting grounds were the seemingly idyllic landscapes of Southern California, from coastal communities to the remote fire roads twisting through the San Gabriel Mountains. This name, Toolbox Killers, wasn't born from complex weaponry, but from the horrifying simplicity and brutality of their methods. The instruments of torture, pliers, ice picks, screwdrivers, wire coat hangers, and sledgehammers, were items commonly found in any household toolbox, transforming the mundane into the monstrous. The accessibility and everyday nature of these tools, repurposed for unimaginable violence, adds a uniquely disturbing layer to their crimes. Their calculated cruelty extended beyond physical torment. In at least one instance, they recorded the final, agonizing moments of their victim. This audio evidence, later played in court, was so profoundly brutal that it reduced seasoned jurors, lawyers, and observers to tears, forcing some to flee the courtroom in distress. The case reveals a twisted partnership, a synergy of sadism forged in prison, that unleashed a wave of terror upon an unsuspecting region. The investigation uncovered a disturbing combination of calculated planning, the acquisition of a specific van designed for abduction, the careful selection of remote locations, the assembly of their toolkit, and the terrifyingly spontaneous nature of their attacks, often targeting girls simply walking or hitchhiking. This approach suggests predators who were both methodical in their preparation and chillingly adaptable in their execution of evil. To understand the terror unleashed in 1979, we must first examine the men behind the Toolbox Killers moniker. Their paths, marked by troubled youths and escalating criminality, converged in prison, forging a partnership built on shared sadistic fantasies. Let's start with Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker. He entered the world on September 27, 1940, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Adopted by George and his wife, Bittaker's childhood involved frequent moves across Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, and finally California. He would later claim that a perceived lack of parental love fueled his early descent into crime. Despite possessing a reported IQ of 138, Bittaker found school tedious and dropped out in 1957 while living in California. His criminal record began early, with a shoplifting arrest at age 12. By his late teens, his offenses escalated to car theft, hit and run, and evading arrest, landing him in the California Youth Authority until age 18. His adult life became a revolving door of crime and incarceration. Convictions included interstate motor vehicle theft in 1959, robbery in 1961, parole violations, theft, hit and run, and burglary throughout the 1960s and early 1970s. Psychological assessments during his incarcerations painted a disturbing picture. In 1961, he was diagnosed as borderline psychotic and basically paranoid, described as manipulative with significant pent-up hostility. A year later, a psychiatrist noted his poor control of impulse behavior. Another borderline psychosis diagnosis followed in 1966, during which Bittaker reportedly bragged that stealing cars made him feel important and expressed feelings of being misunderstood and mistreated. He insisted environmental factors diminished his ability to resist crime. However, a crucial 1974 assessment by forensic psychologist Dr. Ronald Markman, conducted after Bittaker stabbed a supermarket employee who accused him of shoplifting, offered a different perspective. Dr. Markman confirmed Bittaker was a sociopath with superior intelligence and revealed that Bittaker had likely faked his previous psychotic behaviors. This pattern, crime, diagnosis suggesting mental disturbance, incarceration, often followed by early parole despite clear warning signs, and then re-offense, repeated itself multiple times. His manipulative abilities seemed directed not only at potential victims but also at the very system meant to contain him. Bittaker himself appeared disturbingly aware of his nature, later expressing a sense of pride in being psychopathic. The 1974 assault with intent to commit murder conviction led him to the California men's colony, where his path would cross with Roy Norris. Roy Lewis Norris was born 8 years after Bittaker on February 5, 1948, in Greeley, Colorado. Details of his early family life are less documented in the available materials, but Norris himself later spoke of a troubled upbringing, alleging neglect and sexual abuse while in the foster care system, experiences he claimed contributed to later prejudices. Like Bittaker, he didn't finish high school, dropping out at 17 in 1965 to join the Navy. His military service included a 4-month stint in Vietnam in 1969, though he reportedly saw no combat. That same year, he received an administrative discharge from the Navy for unspecified psychological problems. His violent tendencies, particularly sexual violence, surfaced quickly. In November 1969, he forced his way into a woman's car in San Diego and attempted rape. The following May, he brutally attacked a female student at San Diego State University, clubbing her with a stone and slamming her head into concrete, leading to charges of assault with a deadly weapon. This assault led to his confinement in Atascadero State Hospital in 1970 as a mentally disordered sex offender MDSO. In 1975, doctors deemed him no longer a danger to others, and he was released on probation. The assessment proved tragically wrong. Just 3 months after his release, Norris attacked another woman, strangling her with her scarf before raping her. This conviction for forcible rape sent him to the California men's colony at San Luis Obispo. He was also diagnosed with a severe schizoid personality. Norris's history clearly demonstrates a pattern of escalating sexual violence and another instance where the system failed to recognize or contain the danger he posed. While potentially susceptible to a more dominant personality, Norris was already a violent predator before encountering Bittaker. The California men's colony became the crucible where this deadly partnership was forged around 1977 or 1978. Bittaker and Norris became friends, even described by some accounts as considering themselves soulmates who were inseparable. Their bond was cemented by shared, specific, and deeply disturbing fantasies involving the domination, rape, and torture of young women. They didn't just share these fantasies, they actively discussed and analyzed methods for abducting and assaulting women without getting caught, meticulously planning how they would act on these urges upon release. They envisioned a killing spree targeting girls aged 13 to 19. Bittaker was paroled in November 1978, followed by Norris in January 1979. After his release, Norris reportedly committed a rape in Colorado before returning to California and reconnecting with Bittaker. They began spending weekends together, frequenting beaches where Bittaker would photograph teenage girls, all while continuing to refine their plans and scout remote fire roads in the Southern California mountains for places offering sufficient privacy for their intended crimes. The very institution designed to punish and rehabilitate had, in this instance, served as an incubator, allowing two individuals with compatible and dangerous pathologies to find each other and conspire. Upon their release, Bittaker and Norris wasted little time putting their prison-hatched plans into action. The stage for their 5-month reign of terror was set with meticulous preparation, centered around a vehicle they acquired specifically for their deadly purpose. Bittaker purchased a silver-gray 1977 GMC Vandura van, later chillingly nicknamed Murder Mac. He deliberately chose a model with sliding doors, believing it would make it easier to seize victims and drag them inside quickly. The van was windowless, offering privacy for the horrors planned within. They equipped it methodically, installing a bed in the rear, beneath which they stored tools, clothing, restraints, and a cooler. They continued their reconnaissance, exploring remote fire roads in the San Gabriel Mountains, even replacing a lock on a gate with one of their own to ensure private access. Their partnership faced an early test in June 1979 when Norris attempted a solo rape, but the woman managed to escape. After Norris recounted the failure to Bittaker, they solidified their pact. Henceforth, they would act together in all criminal activities. Their targets were tragically specific: teenage girls, typically ranging in age from 13 to 18. An alleged plan existed to abduct and murder one girl for each year of that range, from 13 to 19, a chillingly systematic approach suggesting the victims were seen as objects or trophies to be collected. While they didn't perfectly adhere to this age progression, the intent reveals a disturbing level of premeditation and objectification. They preyed on vulnerability, often finding their victims hitchhiking or walking alone along highways or near beach communities. This calculated preparation and shared pathology set the stage for the horrific events that were about to unfold, marking the beginning of their brief but brutal reign of terror across Southern California. The blending of Bittaker's manipulative intelligence and dominant psychopathy with Norris's history of sexual violence created a potent and deadly combination, a partnership that amplified their individual dark desires into a shared mission of extreme violence and sadism. They weren't merely opportunistic predators. They were planners, strategists of torture and murder, who used their time incarcerated not for reflection or rehabilitation, but for refining their methods and solidifying their bond in a shared world of perverse fantasies. The acquisition of the van and the meticulous scouting of remote locations were not random acts, but deliberate steps in executing a plan discussed and developed within the very system designed to keep society safe from such individuals. This chilling level of premeditation, combined with the accessibility of their chosen instruments of torture, the everyday tools found in a toolbox, made their crimes all the more terrifying and unsettling to the public and investigators alike. The calm, calculated nature of their preparations stood in stark contrast to the horrific brutality of the acts they would commit, a dichotomy that speaks to the depths of their depravity. Their ability to blend into society while harboring such dark intentions, to meticulously plan such horrors, highlights a disturbing facet of criminal psychology, the capacity for individuals to mask their true selves and intentions behind a facade of normalcy. The convergence of their paths in prison, the sharing of their darkest desires, and the subsequent collaboration and planning in executing their crimes underscores the potential for correctional facilities, in some tragic instances, to inadvertently become breeding grounds for more organized and horrific criminal endeavors. The story of Bittaker and Norris is a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous partnerships are forged in the darkest of places, and that the tools of everyday life can be transformed into instruments of unimaginable evil in the wrong hands. Their individual histories, filled with escalating violence and psychological red flags that the system failed to adequately address, culminated in a shared purpose that would leave an indelible scar on the communities they terrorized. The stage was set, the tools were gathered, and the partnership was ready to unleash its horrifying agenda upon unsuspecting victims. And so, with their dark alliance solidified and their instrument of terror, Murder Mac, prepared, Bittaker and Norris were ready to transition from planning to execution. The idyllic landscapes of Southern California, the vibrant beaches and quiet mountain roads, were about to become the backdrop for a series of crimes that would shock the nation and etch the names Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris into the dark history of true crime. Their calculated approach, combined with the chilling spontaneity of their attacks, meant that any young girl walking alone or hitchhiking could become their next target. The vulnerability of their victims, often in seemingly safe or familiar environments, added another layer of terror to their crimes, highlighting how quickly and easily a normal day could turn into a nightmare. The fact that they specifically targeted teenagers, girls on the cusp of adulthood, underscores the predatory nature of their partnership and the profound impact their actions would have not just on the victims themselves, but on their families, friends, and entire communities. The van, a mundane vehicle, became a mobile chamber of horrors, transporting their victims to remote locations where their sadistic fantasies would be brutally enacted. The tools they used, ordinary objects found in any garage, became instruments of unimaginable pain and suffering, earning them a moniker that would forever be associated with their cruelty. The meticulous planning, the scouting of locations, the acquisition of the van, these were not the actions of impulsive criminals, but of predators who had carefully considered how to carry out their horrific acts and evade capture. This level of premeditation, combined with the sheer depravity of their crimes, set them apart as one of the most chilling duos in criminal history. Their story is a grim testament to the fact that evil can wear a seemingly ordinary face and operate with terrifying efficiency, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The beginning of their reign of terror was marked by this chilling convergence of planning, opportunity, and a shared appetite for extreme violence, setting the stage for the horrific events. With their twisted pacts solidified and their mobile chamber of horrors ready, Bittaker and Norris began their terrifying campaign. Their targets, as chillingly planned, were young teenage girls, often those in vulnerable situations, like hitchhiking or walking alone. The period between June and October of 1979 marked a dark chapter for Southern California, as these two men unleashed a level of brutality that was almost unimaginable. The terror began on June 24, 1979. There's some slight variation in sources regarding the exact date, with some citing June 14th, but multiple accounts point strongly to June 24th as the day their horrific spree commenced. Around 7:45 p.m., Roy Norris spotted 16-year-old Lucinda Schaefer walking towards her grandmother's home in Redondo Beach. She was simply on her way home, a normal evening activity, completely unaware of the evil that had just set its sights on her. After failing to lure her into their van with offers of marijuana or a ride, a tactic they likely intended to use to disarm potential victims. They drove ahead, parked, and Norris pretended to work on the van, creating a deceptive scene of mechanical trouble to appear less threatening. As Lucinda passed by, he seized his opportunity. He grabbed her, physically overpowering her, and dragged her inside the van's sliding door. The suddenness and violence of the abduction must have been terrifying. As Norris subdued the struggling girl inside, Bittaker sped away, the van designed for quick entry and rapid escape. To drown out any sounds of struggle or cries for help, Bittaker turned the radio up loud, a calculated move to maintain their horrifying privacy within the moving vehicle. Once inside, Norris bound and gagged her with duct tape, silencing her and preventing her escape. They drove her to their pre-selected fire road in the remote San Gabriel Mountains, a secluded location chosen specifically for its isolation, far from prying eyes and potential witnesses. This wasn't an impulsive crime, it was the execution of a plan. In this isolated mountain location, Lucinda Schaefer endured horrific sexual violence. She was raped, first by Norris, then by Bittaker, and then by Norris again. Accounts from later testimony suggest that despite the unspeakable circumstances, Lucinda displayed remarkable composure. However, in her final moments, she pleaded for a single mercy. She asked to be allowed to pray if they intended to kill her. A request that highlights the sheer terror and her desperate search for solace in the face of death. Tragically, her request was denied. Roy Norris attempted to strangle her manually, but according to later accounts, he faltered, disturbed by the look in her eyes, unable to complete the act of killing her with his bare hands. It was a fleeting moment of what might be perceived as hesitation, quickly overshadowed by the unfathomable cruelty of his partner. Bittaker then took over, displaying a chilling lack of hesitation. He strangled her until she convulsed, a horrifying detail that speaks to the violence of the act. He then further ensured her death by twisting a wire coat hanger around her neck, using vice grip pliers to tighten it with brutal force until she was dead. Her young life was extinguished with common household tools, a grim foreshadowing of the moniker they would earn. Her body was wrapped in plastic and thrown over a steep canyon, discarded like garbage. Lucinda Schaefer's body was never recovered, leaving her family without a proper burial, a profound and lasting pain. Just 2 weeks later, on July 8, 1979, the terror continued. 18-year-old Andrea Joy Hall was hitchhiking along the Pacific Coast Highway, a common practice at the time. After initially passing her, Bittaker and Norris encountered her again in Redondo Beach. With Norris hidden in the back of the van, Bittaker offered her a drink, another seemingly innocuous gesture used to lure a victim. As she approached the van, unsuspecting, Norris attacked from the back, subduing her after a struggle. He twisted her arm and secured her with adhesive tape, preventing her from escaping or calling for help. She was taken even deeper into the remote San Gabriel Mountains than Lucinda Schaefer had been, further increasing her isolation and vulnerability. Andrea Hall also endured repeated rapes by both men. The brutality didn't end there. Bittaker, in a chilling display of sadism, forced her to pose for Polaroid pictures and perform sexual acts, documenting her suffering for his twisted gratification. This act of photographing his victim added a horrifying dimension to his crimes, indicating a desire to capture and relive the moments of torture and domination. He then informed her he was going to kill her, giving her a perverse challenge. He told her to justify her life, demanding a reason why he shouldn't end it. This psychological torment, forcing his victim to plead for her life, reveals the depths of his cruelty, extending the suffering beyond the physical. He then brutally murdered her by thrusting an ice pick through one ear into her brain, an act of unimaginable violence. He repeated the act on the other side, then stomped on the pick until it broke, a detail that underscores the force and brutality of the attack. He finished by strangling her, ensuring her death after the ice pick attack. Her body, like Lucinda's, was thrown off another cliff, denied the dignity of a proper resting place. Andrea Hall's body was also never recovered, leaving her family with the same unbearable burden of not knowing where she was. The pattern of abduction, sexual violence, torture with common tools, and body disposal in remote locations was becoming horrifyingly clear, demonstrating the systematic nature of their crimes. Their confidence was growing, and their methods were escalating in brutality. The next victims were taken on September 2 or 3, 1979, the exact date varying slightly in different sources. 15-year-old Jackie Doris Gilliam and 13-year-old Jacqueline Leah Lamp were either hitchhiking or sitting at a bus stop near Hermosa or Redondo Beach when they encountered Bittaker and Norris. The girls accepted an offer for a ride, a seemingly innocent decision that would lead to unimaginable horror. Inside the van, they were offered marijuana, likely another tactic to put them at ease or make them compliant. However, they soon realized they were being driven towards the mountains, not the beach as promised. As the terrifying realization set in, Leah Lamp, the younger of the two, attempted to escape by opening the sliding door of the van. A brave but desperate act by a 13-year-old facing imminent danger, but her attempt was thwarted. Norris struck her on the head with a weighted bag, knocking her briefly unconscious. He then moved to subdue Jackie Gilliam. When Leah regained consciousness and, with incredible courage, tried to flee again, Norris dragged her back into the van. Bittaker, realizing the situation, stopped the van. He punched Jackie Gilliam, further asserting their dominance through physical violence, and helped Norris bind and gag both terrified girls, ensuring they could not escape or call for help. What followed was an extended period of captivity, a nightmare that lasted for nearly 2 days. They were held in the mountains, subjected to repeated sexual and physical abuse by both men. The prolonged nature of their captivity, unlike the immediate murders of the previous victims, indicates a further escalation in the killer's sadism and their desire to prolong the suffering of their victims. During this time, Bittaker raped Jackie Gilliam, and chillingly, he made an audio recording of the assault. In a perverse act of psychological torture, he forced her to pretend she was his cousin during the recording, adding a layer of twisted role-playing to the already horrific act. He tortured her with an ice pick, stabbing her breasts and using pliers on her nipple, inflicting agonizing pain with common tools. He then stabbed her in both ears with the ice pick before strangling her to death. Leah Lamp was then forced from the van. Roy Norris struck her head with a sledgehammer, a brutal act of violence. As Bittaker began strangling her, she opened her eyes. In a final horrifying act of cruelty, Norris bludgeoned her again as Bittaker completed the strangulation. Their bodies were discarded over an embankment. Unlike the first two victims, their remains were later found, providing some degree of closure, however minimal, for their families. The 2-day ordeal and the level of torture inflicted on Jackie and Leah demonstrate the escalating depravity of Bittaker and Norris and the synergistic effect of their shared sadism. The final known victim was taken on Halloween night, October 31, 1979. 16-year-old Shirley Lynette Ledford was hitchhiking home from a party in Sunland to Junga. It's possible she accepted a ride because she recognized Bittaker from a local McDonald's where she worked, a tragically misplaced sense of familiarity and safety. After she refused their offer of marijuana, Bittaker drove to a secluded street where Norris brandished a knife, using the threat of violence to gain control. They bound and gagged her with construction tape, a readily available material repurposed for abduction. For over an hour, while Norris drove, Bittaker tormented Shirley Ledford in the back of the van. He subjected her to a horrifying litany of abuse, slapping her, mocking her, beating her with his fists, demanding she scream louder, a chilling insight into his sadistic pleasure in her terror. He struck her with a hammer, tortured her breasts with pliers, and repeatedly raped and sodomized her. Crucially, and perhaps most chillingly, Bittaker turned on his tape recorder, capturing Shirley Ledford's desperate pleas and screams alongside his own cold, taunting voice. This audio recording would become a key piece of evidence, a horrifying testament to the brutality of her final hours. Norris also participated in the torture, striking her elbow repeatedly with a sledgehammer even after she begged him to stop, highlighting his active role in the sadism. After approximately 2 hours of this unimaginable ordeal, Norris, acting at Bittaker's direction, strangled Shirley Ledford with a wire coat hanger tightened with pliers, the same method used on Lucinda Schaefer. Her body was unceremoniously dumped on a residential lawn in Sunland, a chilling display of carelessness that would ultimately aid in their capture. Shirley Ledford's body was recovered, providing tangible evidence of their final crime. The pattern established across these 5 murders was horrifyingly consistent: the use of the customized van, murder Mac, for abduction, transport, and often as the site of torture, the specific targeting of vulnerable teenage girls, the use of restraints like tape and bindings, transport to secluded areas, primarily the remote fire roads of the San Gabriel Mountains, extreme sexual violence including rape, sodomy, and forced oral copulation, sadistic torture using common tools like ice picks, pliers, sledgehammers, and wire hangers, which cemented their toolbox killer's name, the documentation of their acts through audio recording and photographs, and finally, the disposal of the bodies, sometimes in remote locations, sometimes with chilling carelessness. The progression from the first murders to the later ones, particularly the 2-day captivity of Gilliam and Lamp and the recording of Ledford's torture, suggests an escalation in boldness, confidence, and the depths of their shared sadism. They were becoming more brazen, more depraved, and more meticulous in documenting their horrifying acts, perhaps believing they were untouchable. This detailed account of the victims and their terrible final hours paints a grim picture of the evil that stalked Southern California in the summer and fall of 1979, leaving a trail of unspeakable pain and loss in its wake. The arbitrary nature of their victim selection, focusing only on age and vulnerability, underscored the terrifying reality that any young girl could have fallen prey to their monstrous partnership. The commonality of the tools used added a disturbing element of relatability to the horror, turning everyday objects into symbols of terror. For 5 months, Bittaker and Norris operated with terrifying impunity. They moved in the shadows, leaving a trail of devastation but few immediate clues. Their elaborate planning and sadistic rituals, however, contained the seeds of their own destruction. A chilling piece of evidence and a moment of careless boasting would ultimately bring their reign of terror to an end. One key discovery, likely made after Bittaker's arrest, was the audio cassette tape found in his possession. This tape contained the horrifying sounds of Shirley Ledford's final 2 hours. It captured her pleading, her screams of pain and terror, the sounds of blows landing, and the cold, taunting voices of Bittaker and Norris orchestrating her torture. The tape documented Bittaker demanding acts of oral copulation and Norris later urging Ledford to scream louder during the assault. When played during Bittaker's trial, its impact was visceral and devastating, leaving no doubt about the calculated cruelty involved. This recording provided irrefutable proof of the torture and Bittaker's direct participation, becoming a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Years later, Bittaker's own words in an interview seemed to echo the detachment evident on the tape, questioning an interviewer. "Do you understand what it feels like to actually put an ice pick through someone's ear and not feel anything?" This chilling statement encapsulates the profound lack of empathy that defined his actions. Despite their careful planning to avoid detection, which they had discussed even while incarcerated, the partnership began to unravel due to Roy Norris's inability to keep silent. In November 1979, just weeks after their last known murder, Norris bragged about the killings, sharing details of his and Bittaker's exploits with a former prison acquaintance named Joe Jackson. Perhaps driven by a need for notoriety, a twisted sense of accomplishment, or simply a severe lack of judgment, Norris's boasting provided the crucial break investigators desperately needed. Joe Jackson, the man Norris confided in, was understandably disturbed by the horrific revelations. Unlike others who might have been intimidated or remained silent, Jackson did the right thing. He reported the information to his attorney, who promptly contacted the Los Angeles Police Department. This act of confiding, this lapse in criminal discipline on Norris's part, directly undermined all their previous efforts at concealment and meticulously laid plans, and it set the authorities squarely on their trail. It's a classic example of how the need to boast or share secrets can be the downfall of criminals, no matter how carefully they plan. Acting swiftly on the information provided via Jackson, police initiated surveillance on Roy Norris. They needed a legal reason to apprehend him, something more immediate than the still-developing murder investigation. On November 20, 1979, detectives observed Norris dealing marijuana, a clear violation of his parole terms. This gave them the legal justification they needed to arrest him, bringing him in for questioning regarding the far more serious accusations stemming from Jackson's report. Norris was arrested by Hermosa Beach police for the parole violation. That same day, November 20, 1979, Lawrence Bittaker was also apprehended. Burbank police arrested him at his home on suspicion of rape and kidnapping, likely based on the rapidly developing investigation and the information expected to be obtained from Norris. Bittaker's arrest was made pursuant to a RAMI warrant. This type of warrant is issued based on a probable cause affidavit detailing evidence linking an individual to crimes, allowing for an arrest before formal charges are filed. In Bittaker's case, the affidavit likely included evidence such as a positive identification by a previous rape victim, indicating he may have had other victims or attempted victims who survived, and police reports implicating his van. This warrant was deemed legally valid, as it established the necessary probable cause for his arrest, even though it didn't formally initiate the criminal proceedings itself. The net had closed on the toolbox killers. With Bittaker and Norris in custody, the focus shifted dramatically from investigation to prosecution. The path to justice would involve navigating the complex legal system, presenting horrifying evidence, and ultimately securing convictions. A crucial turning point in the case came with a plea bargain, a deal that would significantly alter the fate of one of the killers. 10 days after his arrest, on November 30th, 1979, Roy Norris was confronted by detectives and the district attorney. Faced with the mounting evidence against him and the very real potential for a capital murder conviction, the death penalty, Norris confessed. He detailed the crimes, providing investigators with first-hand accounts of the abductions, torture, and murders. But as he confessed, he also began to shift blame onto Bittaker, attempting to portray himself as the less culpable partner, the one who was perhaps influenced or even coerced by Bittaker's more dominant personality. While the dynamic between the two men was certainly complex, Norris's active participation in the violence made his claims of being merely a follower difficult to fully accept. Norris's confession paved the way for a plea bargain, a strategic move by the prosecution to secure a conviction against the seemingly more dangerous partner, Bittaker. Norris agreed to plead guilty to all counts against him. This included 5 counts of murder, 4 first degree, 1 second degree, acknowledging his direct involvement in the deaths of all 5 girls. He also pleaded guilty to additional charges of kidnapping, rape, and robbery. Crucially, as part of the agreement, he pledged to testify truthfully and fully against Lawrence Bittaker. In exchange for this comprehensive confession and his agreement to be the prosecution's key witness, the prosecution agreed not to seek the death penalty against him. This was a classic prisoner's dilemma scenario, where one partner is given an incentive to betray the other to save himself from the most severe punishment. Norris chose self-preservation over any semblance of loyalty to Bittaker, the man some sources claimed he once considered a soulmate. His cooperation was invaluable to the prosecution. It provided them with a detailed roadmap of the crimes, a first-hand account of the horrors that occurred, and a witness who could directly implicate Bittaker in the most heinous acts. Roy Norris's testimony effectively sealed Lawrence Bittaker's fate while saving Norris himself from execution. It was a grim bargain, but one that the justice system sometimes makes to ensure that at least one of the perpetrators is brought to justice and the full story of the crimes can be told through testimony. The contrast in their fates, one facing the ultimate penalty and the other life in prison with the possibility of parole, highlights the significant impact of this cooperation agreement. With Norris's cooperation secured, the prosecution was armed with powerful evidence and a key witness, ready to build their case against Lawrence Bittaker. The stage was set for a trial that would expose the full, horrifying extent of the toolbox killer's depravity to the world. The audio tape, the photographs, the detailed confession of Norris, all of these elements, born from the killer's own actions and subsequent unraveling, would come together to form a damning case. The investigation, initiated by a desperate boast and aided by the discovery of the tools of their sadism and the recording of their cruelty, had successfully brought these two monsters out of the shadows and into the grasp of the law. The journey through the justice system was just beginning, but the first crucial steps, identification, capture, and securing key evidence and testimony had been successfully completed, paving the way for the trials and sentences that would follow. With Roy Norris's plea bargain secured and his agreement to testify, the focus of the prosecution turned to Lawrence Bittaker. Norris's cooperation provided the state with a powerful witness and a detailed roadmap of the crimes, effectively isolating Bittaker as the primary target for the death penalty. Lawrence Bittaker's trial began in February 1980. He pleaded not guilty to all charges and maintained his innocence, denying everything. This was in stark contrast to Norris's confession and cooperation. The prosecution, however, was armed with a mountain of evidence against him, much of it gathered through intense investigation and Norris's testimony. Roy Norris provided detailed, damning testimony outlining the abduction, torture, rape, and murder of each of the 5 victims. His account was crucial, offering a first-hand perspective on the horrors that occurred inside the van and in the mountains. His testimony was corroborated by other powerful evidence. The horrific Shirley Ledford audio tape was played in court. As we discussed, this tape captured Ledford's desperate pleas, her screams of pain and terror, the sounds of blows landing, and the cold, taunting voices of Bittaker and Norris. Its impact on the courtroom was profound, reportedly reducing seasoned jurors and observers to tears and forcing some to leave. This recording provided undeniable proof of the torture and Bittaker's direct involvement, becoming a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. In addition to the audio tape, Polaroid photographs Bittaker had taken of victims Andrea Hall and Jackie Gilliam were presented as evidence. These images, taken during the victims' captivity and torture, offered a sickening visual confirmation of the crimes and Bittaker's role in documenting them. The prosecution also presented testimony from motel residents and acquaintances to whom Bittaker had shown nude photos of victims and played recordings. These recordings likely included the tape of Jackie Gilliam's rape, where Bittaker forced her to pretend she was his cousin. This demonstrated not only his lack of remorse, but also a disturbing desire to share and perhaps relive his horrific acts with others. Further incriminating statements came from fellow inmates Bittaker had confided in while awaiting trial. One cellmate testified that Bittaker asked him to draw a picture resembling Lucinda Schaefer surrounded by coat hangers and pliers, and to sign it Pliers Bittaker. This nickname was reportedly derived from stories of his torturing women, a chilling detail that suggested a degree of notoriety or reputation even within the prison system. Another inmate recounted Bittaker describing the Gilliam and Lamp murders in vivid detail, including acts of torture Norris hadn't mentioned, indicating that Bittaker may have been the more sadistic and leading force in their partnership. Throughout the trial, Bittaker displayed a chilling lack of remorse for the killings. This aligns with psychological assessments that painted him as a manipulative sociopath. Astonishingly, he even co-authored a book titled The Last Ride during this period, which reportedly detailed his partnership with Norris and their killing spree. Writing a book about his crimes while on trial for his life further underscored his detachment and apparent pride in his actions. On February 17, 1981, after hearing the evidence and testimony, the jury returned its verdict. They found Lawrence Bittaker guilty on all 26 felony counts lodged against him. These included 5 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of kidnapping, criminal conspiracy, rape, forcible oral copulation, sodomy, and being an ex-felon in possession of a firearm. The trial then moved to the penalty phase, where the jury had to decide whether Bittaker would face life in prison or the death penalty. The prosecution presented evidence of aggravating factors, detailing the brutality and circumstances of the murders. The jury found an overwhelming 38 special circumstances to be true. These special circumstances legally codified the multifaceted brutality of the crimes and were crucial in determining the sentence. They included 20 multiple murder special circumstances, accounting for the 5 victims. There were also felony murder special circumstances based on kidnapping 5 counts, rape 5 counts, forcible oral copulation for Hall and Ledford, and forcible sodomy for Ledford. Furthermore, the jury found intentional murder by means of torture for Schaefer, Hall, Gilliam, and Ledford. A specific finding was also made that Leah Lamp was murdered specifically to prevent her from testifying as a witness. These findings left no doubt about the extreme cruelty and premeditation involved in Bittaker's crimes. Based on these findings, Lawrence Bittaker was sentenced to death on March 22, 1981. Some sources mention March 24th as the sentencing date, a minor discrepancy in the timeline. He was admitted to California's death row at San Quentin State Prison on March 30, 1981. Roy Norris received his sentence following his guilty plea and testimony against Bittaker. On April 28, 1981, he was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Some sources cite different dates related to the plea process or sentencing, such as May 1980. The stark difference in sentences, death for Bittaker versus a sentence with the possibility of parole for Norris, vividly illustrated the profound impact of Norris's cooperation agreement with the prosecution. He saved himself from the death penalty by helping to ensure Bittaker was condemned. The sheer sadism and coordinated cruelty displayed by Bittaker and Norris raised profound questions about the nature of their partnership. How could 2 individuals descend to such depths together? Psychological assessments and expert analysis offer potential frameworks for understanding their deadly dynamic. Bittaker consistently emerges from the assessments and case details as the more dominant, psychopathic figure. He was highly intelligent, with a reported IQ of 138. Yet, he was manipulative, sadistic, and seemingly devoid of empathy. His history of faking prior psychotic episodes points to a calculated criminality rather than genuine mental illness in the traditional sense. His own reported pride in being psychopathic, as revealed in later interviews, underscores his embrace of this dark identity. Former FBI profiler John Douglas, renowned for his work interviewing serial killers, reportedly described Bittaker as the most frightening individual he had ever encountered. Bittaker's chillingly detached comment about putting an ice pick through an ear without feeling anything speaks volumes about his capacity for cruelty and his profound lack of human connection. Norris, while possessing his own significant history of sexual violence and diagnosed with psychological issues, including a severe schizoid personality, often appears in accounts as the more subordinate partner. His confinement as a mentally disordered sex offender and rapid reoffense after being deemed no longer a danger highlight his own dangerous pathology, but also perhaps suggest a degree of instability or susceptibility to influence. This dynamic has led experts, including criminologists James Allen Fox and Jack Levin, to identify the Bittaker-Norris partnership as a potential case of folie douce, a French term meaning madness for two. This concept, also known as shared psychotic disorder, describes a situation where delusional beliefs, or, in this case, extreme sadistic fantasies, are transferred from a dominant individual, the primary or inducer, to one or more susceptible individuals, the secondary or acceptor. In this model, Bittaker would be the primary, his extreme sadistic worldview and dominant personality driving the escalation of violence, while Norris would be the secondary, whose own existing pathologies and potential susceptibility made him receptive to Bittaker's influence. Evidence sometimes cited to support this dynamic includes accounts of Norris's reported initial objection to killing their first victim, Lucinda Schaefer, an objection that was overruled by Bittaker's insistence that it had to be done. Many experts believe the murders likely wouldn't have occurred had the two men never met, suggesting a synergistic effect where their combined pathologies created something far more monstrous and capable of extreme violence than either individual might have been alone. Their dark bond nurtured within the prison system became a catalyst for serial murder and torture upon their release. However, attributing the crime solely to folie douce potentially oversimplifies Norris's role and his own inherent dangerousness. His own violent history prior to meeting Bittaker demonstrates he was far from an innocent drawn into darkness. He was already a convicted rapist and had committed brutal assaults. It seems more plausible that Bittaker's extreme sadism and dominant personality acted as an accelerant, amplifying Norris's existing violent tendencies and pushing the pair across the threshold from individual acts of violence into coordinated, serial torture and murder. The partnership enabled crimes potentially beyond the scope or depravity either might have committed alone, a terrifying fusion of compatible pathologies nurtured in the confines of prison. While folie douce provides a framework for understanding how such a shared descent into madness could occur, it does not diminish the individual responsibility of each man for the horrific crimes they committed. Both were active participants, though perhaps with differing levels of initiative and dominance within their deadly partnership. The trial brought these dynamics to light, and the sentences reflected the court's assessment of their individual culpability, ultimately sending Bittaker to death row as the seemingly more responsible and dangerous of the two. Following their convictions, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris vanished from public view, confined within the walls of California's prison system for decades. Their final chapters unfolded not with the drama of an execution chamber or the hope of parole, but with the quiet inevitability of aging and illness. Lawrence Bittaker spent nearly 4 decades on death row at the notorious San Quentin State Prison. His appeals process, typical for capital cases in California, stretched on year after year, ensuring his sentence was never carried out. For victims' families and those who sought to see justice fully served, this lengthy appeals process meant a delayed finality, as Bittaker remained alive on death row for nearly 40 years. The legal battles continued for decades, a stark reminder of the complex and often slow-moving nature of the justice system in capital cases. Every appeal, every motion, every legal maneuver meant that the families of Lucinda, Andrea, Jackie, Leah, and Shirley had to endure the continued existence of the man condemned for their daughter's brutal murders. Roy Norris served his 45 years to life sentence, primarily at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego County. Despite becoming eligible for parole after serving 30 years of his sentence, his requests were repeatedly denied by the parole board. The horrific nature of his crimes, even with his cooperation against Bittaker, made release unthinkable to many, including the parole board members who reviewed his case. The severity and sadism of the toolbox killer's crimes ensured that Norris, despite avoiding the death penalty, would remain incarcerated for the rest of his life. The details of his participation, even if argued by him to be subordinate to Bittaker's influence, were too heinous to allow him to re-enter society. The parole hearings, while offering a theoretical chance of release, became another point of re-traumatization for the victims' families, who often had to relive the nightmare of the crimes to oppose his release. Ultimately, both men died of natural causes while still in prison, eluding both the executioner in Bittaker's case and the parole board in Norris's case. Lawrence Bittaker died at San Quentin on December 13, 2019, at the age of 79. His partner in crime, Roy Norris, followed him just over 2 months later, dying at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville, where he had been transferred on February 24, 2020, at the age of 72. Their deaths brought a form of closure to the case in that the perpetrators could no longer cause harm and were no longer living. However, for the families of their victims, it may have felt like an anticlimactic end, denying them the finality of seeing Bittaker executed as he was sentenced, or ensuring Norris never tasted freedom again after the horrors he inflicted. The quiet deaths in prison contrasted sharply with the violent ends they forced upon their victims, a disparity that can leave those affected feeling that full justice was not achieved. The pain inflicted by the toolbox killers extended far beyond the victims themselves, devastating their families and sending ripples of fear through the community. While specific victim impact statements from the families were not available in the researched materials, the general purpose of such statements is to convey the profound and lasting harm, emotional, financial, and psychological, caused by crime. The families of Lucinda Schaefer, Andrea Hall, Jacqueline Gilliam, Jacqueline Lamp, and Shirley Ledford endured unimaginable suffering. The fact that the bodies of Lucinda Schaefer and Andrea Hall were never recovered undoubtedly added an unbearable layer of unresolved grief and anguish for their loved ones. Not being able to lay their daughters to rest, to have a physical place to mourn, added immeasurably to their pain and denied them even the solace of a proper burial. The absence of remains leaves a permanent void, a constant reminder of the brutality and disrespect shown to their loved ones, even in death. The emotional and psychological scars left on these families are a permanent legacy of the toolbox killer's crimes, a pain that time can never fully erase. The ripple effect of their actions extended to the wider community, instilling fear and a loss of innocence, changing how people viewed safety and vulnerability in their own neighborhoods. The case of the toolbox killers remains one of the most disturbing in the annals of American crime. Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris embodied a particular kind of evil, calculated, sadistic, and amplified by their deadly partnership. Their use of common household tools for torture, the methodical planning fused with opportunistic violence, and the chilling audio recording of their cruelty paint a portrait of profound depravity. The audio tape of Shirley Ledford's torture, in particular, stands out as one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence ever presented in a courtroom, a direct window into the heart of their sadism. The case also serves as a stark reminder of potential systemic failures. Both men had extensive criminal histories and alarming psychological flags prior to their 1979 killing spree. Bittaker had diagnosis of being borderline psychotic and paranoid in the 1960s, and a later assessment confirming he was a sociopath with superior intelligence who likely faked previous psychotic behaviors. Norris was confined as a mentally disordered sex offender but released after doctors deemed him no longer a danger. Yet, both benefited from parole systems that released them back into society despite clear warning signs. Their meeting and subsequent plotting within the prison system itself raise uncomfortable questions about inmate monitoring and the potential for correctional facilities to inadvertently foster dangerous alliances. This wasn't a case of two individuals suddenly snapping. Their paths towards extreme violence were long and marked by missed opportunities for intervention by the very systems designed to protect the public. While the Foley-Do framework offers a lens through which to view their dynamic, suggesting a shared descent into madness driven by a dominant partner, it cannot fully explain the horror, nor can it absolve either man of responsibility. Bittaker's dominant sadism found a willing, if perhaps subordinate, participant in Norris, whose own history was already stained with violence. Norris was a convicted rapist before meeting Bittaker, indicating he was already capable of significant harm. Together, they created a vortex of terror that consumed 5 young lives. Their partnership was a catastrophic combination of individual pathologies that, when combined, led to a level of cruelty neither might have reached alone. Decades later, the echoes of their crimes linger in the memories of the victims: Lucinda Schaefer, Andrea Hall, Jacqueline Gilliam, Jacqueline Lamp, and Shirley Ledford. Their names must be remembered, not just the names of their killers. The pain of their families endures, a constant reminder of the lives stolen and the futures lost. And the chilling record of human cruelty documented in case files, court transcripts, and the infamous audio tape serves as a somber testament to the depths of human evil and the enduring need for vigilance. The shadows cast by the toolbox killers remind us that the capacity for evil exists, sometimes in the most unexpected places, and that staying informed and vigilant is crucial in the ongoing effort to understand and prevent such horrors. Their story is a dark lesson from the past, one that continues to resonate in the study of true crime and the ongoing efforts to improve the justice and correctional systems. Thank you for joining us on Silent Shadows. We hope that by shedding light on these dark cases, we can honor the victims and contribute to a greater understanding of the complexities of crime. Join us next time for another deep dive into the mysteries behind true crime cases from around the world.